All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Couch Warrior podcast. As always, I'm your host, and today for episode 80 of the pod, I'll be going live with my guy, Jon Kelly over here. Jon, how's it going, brother? Thanks for coming on for this card. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Mike. Thanks for having me on. It's been a while, as we kind of talked about before the show started, but glad we could link back up. And we have, honestly, a pretty fun card here. A lot of fights. I think it's 14 now with the short notice, folks. So, I mean, it's a big slate, and it's an early card, which you know I'm a big fan of. So, yeah, ready to dive into it with you, brother.
How early is it? I actually didn't even know.
It's 2 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, sweet. I also prefer earlier cards, especially like 2 p.m. because you kind of know, because I used to come on your on the round table. But for me on the weekends, 2 p.m. is about my my wake up time. So nice to wake up right for the fights every weekend. But we can hop into it. We got 14 fights, like you mentioned. And for the first one, we have Lucas Alexander versus Jeka Saragih. This is a short notice bout that they put together, but it's been, I think, 2 weeks now since they did it. So not as short notice as the other ones we're going to talk about. Alexander, 8-3-0, 28 years old. He's 5'11" with a 73-inch reach. Saragih, 13-3-0, 28 as well. Going to be 3 inches shorter and have a 4-inch reach disadvantage. Jon, why don't you start us off for this one, brother?
Yeah, this is one where it's not really one that I'm super pumped about. There's a few matchups that I really do like. This one is very low level. When you see Lucas Alexander, who I honestly forgot who the guy was. I had to go back and I'm like, wait, for some reason I was thinking Lucas Almeida, and I'm like, no, Almeida's actually good. This other guy, he's okay. I mean, he's definitely more of a striker, seems to have power. I would say I rate him higher than Jeka Saragih. Saragih's the road to UFC fighter. He fought Jubilee, your boy, in his UFC debut. And he got knocked out, right? He lost in, I think it was the second round. Yep. But he just doesn't seem to have a skill set that I think is going to translate to winning rounds at the UFC level. He does have power and he swings with bad intentions for sure, but I just don't really think he has really much else. Like, he's not throwing a ton of volume out there. You have seen him kind of grapple a little bit on the regional scene, but as we saw against Jubilee, against anybody that knows what they're doing, like, he's just a fish out of water on the mat. So it's not like he has that going for him here. And he's facing a guy in Alexander who, that's the way that you beat him. You grapple against this guy. I think it's all 3 of his career losses came by submission. So it's one of those things where I just don't think Saragih is all that good, but I also just think from a matchup standpoint, he doesn't have the one clear weakness that a guy like Alexander, he'd be able to take advantage of. So Alexander's a massive favorite, which I don't like, but I do think he probably gets his hand raised here. How about you?
Yeah, I'm on the same page. Like you mentioned, Jubilee, not my guy anymore. He's officially disowned after 294, but that was my own fault. But anyways, I never really thought too highly of Saragih. Even leading up to the Jubilee fight, in his road to UFC fights, I bet against him in the second one, not the first, because he was fighting an absolute bum, but the second one, he was fighting a decent guy, and I really didn't think he'd win. And I didn't think he was winning either. And then he got that little flurry, and he hit him with a crazy right hand and knocked him out. Clearly has power, but everything is kind of in these short flurries. Everything is like without much setup. He's very explosive, but there's just not much substance to it. And then no grappling whatsoever from him. Takedown defense, not great. He did wrestle in the first road to UFC fight, but like I said, terrible competition. Extremely hittable. Lucas Alexander, like, seeing him at -500 is absolutely insane. But it kind of just tells you, like, if people aren't running to play Saragih when Lucas Alexander is -500, it's saying something. And Alexander, to give him credit, 72% striking defense. We're working with a short sample size, but he does move away from shots really well. He does use his range very well. Rangy guy. Like I said, I think it's like a 5-inch reach advantage, something along those lines. He keeps the strikes nice and straight, a lot of lateral movement. as long as he can keep safe and not get backed up into a corner, which he does kind of allow sometimes, I think he should roll here. But Jeka could definitely bonk him. So I wouldn't parlay him at -500 personally, but I will pick Alexander as well. Moving on, though, we've got Charles Johnson versus Rafael Estevam. Johnson 13-5-0. He's 32 years old, 5'9" at the 70-inch reach. Estevam 11-0 undefeated. He's going to be 4 years younger at 27. Is that 4? No, that's 5 years younger. 1 inch shorter and have a 1 inch reach disadvantage. I'll start us off here. So my initial reaction to it pre-tape was Estevam, just because I remember the grappling. I remember him being really strong, and I remember Johnson not having the best takedown defense on the planet. But when I ran the tape, at this point, it's dog or pass for me. I don't know if I can put any money on it because there's too many questions. With Rafael Estevam, we don't really have much tape of him going long. We don't have much tape of him going into the third round or to the decision. And because of that, I don't really know how the cardio is going to hold up if he's using that grappling pace that he uses. We've seen him do it up until like the second round. He has gone to the decision before, but I personally couldn't find the tape for it. And I don't think a lot of people were able to. And that's just my main concern is he going to slow down? Because if not, he's very strong. He's very explosive. He times his takedowns well. That's what he's always looking for. He'll strike for a little bit just to set it up, but I don't really rate his striking very highly. In one of his LFA fights, I believe it was the Estevez fight, he was beating up on the guy, but every time they were on the feet, he was getting very wild. It seemed like he was uncomfortable, and he even got wobbled in the first round at the end, very, very end, right before the buzzer. And I just have concerns about if he's stuck on the feet, if he's not getting those takedowns. Is he going to gas? Is he going to get completely outstruck by Charles Johnson? Because Charles Johnson, he starts a bit slow, and he's a little disappointing sometimes, but his output is a hit or miss. Sometimes it's fantastic. Sometimes it's not too great. But I do think he's going to be throwing more than Estevam on the feet. I think he throws more straight. He's going to be landing quicker, and he's going to be the one landing more effectively if they're at range. And his takedown defense isn't great, but he's fighting guys like Makayev, right, and Durden. And both of those guys, they took him down over 12 times. But first of all, it took 12 takedowns because he kept getting back up, right? That's already a good thing, and it's something he does. And both guys also have really good cardio. Durden doesn't gas. Makayev doesn't gas. Maybe a little bit, honestly, but Durden certainly doesn't gas. And Estevam, like I said, I just don't know. So I want to play Charles Johnson as the dog, but then I also don't want to be stuck with him. Estevam turns out to have fantastic cardio and just holds him down for 3 rounds. So for now, it's a pass. I'm going to pick Charles Johnson because I do think he's going to stuff takedowns, and I do think he can win on the feet, but I'm going to need a better line to get onto it. How about you, John?
Yeah, so we got our first, I guess, minor disagreement here. So I do like the Estevam side. Obviously, I wish I got in earlier. I didn't bet him. I may bet him come the weekend. I'm going to see what happens with this line. I believe he was the dog earlier in the week, though. Now he's like -130. But honestly, I still think he's the rightful side here, just for a couple reasons. Now, Charles Johnson, you mentioned the key things with him, right? Like very athletic. I think he was another like Olympic background as far as that goes. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I'm getting my wires crossed, but I think he had some sort of
tattoo, but I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I think it was some sort of Olympic ties. But anyway, I think it was like long jump or something. Like I don't think it was wrestling. I think it was like something else. But the dude's very athletic, good cardio, like you mentioned. It's just that the things that I don't like about him is even when he has the striking advantage, which he's had multiple times in the UFC, he doesn't do enough to separate in those moments. And that's why we see him go to the judges' scorecards and you never feel good about it, whether you bet him or you bet against him. It's like maybe he landed a few more strikes, doesn't have a ton of power, and again, just doesn't separate. Like that fight against Ode Osborne sticks out to me because coming into that fight, I'm like, okay, I'm going to look to play Charles Johnson live. I think this is the best betting angle. Osborne fades in 3-round fights. Johnson has good cardio. I think he's going to take over. I got the line I wanted. I dumped it on Charles Johnson. And what did he do round 3? I think he outlanded Osborne, if I'm not mistaken, but it wasn't by much. Like it wasn't anything. He didn't land any big shots. He just didn't put his foot on the gas pedal. And that's what I hate about Charles Johnson, is because even if he does have that cardio edge against Estevam, which I don't know if he will, because I think Estevam, like you mentioned, is more of a question mark in terms of his cardio. But even if it does come to where Estevam wins the first or maybe even the first two or whatever, or it's 1-1 going into the third. I'm just not convinced that Charles Johnson is going to separate in that third round because we haven't seen him do it a couple times. So, and then you mentioned the grappling edge for Estevam. I do think he's a good grappler. Obviously, the level of competition has been pretty low. So we'll see if that translates against a guy like Charles Johnson, who is going to make him work and repeatedly work back to his feet. But I kind of side with the grappling of Estevam, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think it is going to translate, or at least translate enough to where he might not be just dominating him on the mat, but we might see extended sequences of him being controlled up against the fence, much like that Muhammad Mokaev fight, so to speak.
Yeah, fair enough. And I looked it up, the tattoo. Turns out he did not ever compete or anything with the Olympics. I don't know why he actually got it.
Interesting.
I didn't want to actually sit and read it, but he has an all-state wrestling background, it says, and he was a two-time AAU track and field champion.
That's where it came from. I swear I read somewhere he did a trial run for the Olympics for track and field, like long jump or something. I don't know. I might have to dig into that one later and fact check myself.
Yeah, I'll go back to the article later. It wasn't about to read it here, but it was definitely curious, and I was laughing that there's a whole ass article about it. But moving on, we've got another Johnson, Chad Anheliger versus Jose Johnson. Chad is 12-6-0. He's 36 years old. Going to be 5'6" with the 64-inch reach. Johnson on the other side, he's 15-8-0, 28, so he's going to be 8 years younger, 6 inches taller at 6 feet tall, and he's going to have a 7-inch reach advantage. John, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of the intangibles. This is almost like a system play for me. You have a guy who's way bigger, way longer, has like an 8-inch reach advantage, way younger. And then you have a guy like Chad Anheliger, who I never thought was good. I bet Gafarov against him on Contender Series. And I feel like if they ran it back, Gafarov wins that, like, I don't know, 8 out of 10 times, but it is what it is. I'm still salty about it, as you can tell. But now you have an older fighter at featherweight. He turns 37 years old in a couple weeks now, coming off, I believe, a shoulder injury. I think he even had surgery. And that's why we had such a long layoff here. And again, I don't think that the guy was ever really UFC level. He's obviously got that dog in him. He's got heart, which you love to see. But in terms of the skill set, it's just not there for me. So outside of him being able to like snatch up a crazy submission or land a big punch, like I just don't see him winning UFC fights. And then on the flip side, Jose Johnson, he's not all that great either. Let's be real. But he does have at least some things that I like. I mentioned the intangibles, big reach advantage, a lot bigger. He is a pretty solid striker. This is a guy that has a highly experienced regional background and amateur background. He fought multiple times on Contender Series, and he keeps a pretty decent pace in a lot of his fights. Now, he can mix in the grappling. He's actually a sneaky good submission grappler, and this is one of the props that I'm going to look to attack is Johnson by sub if we get a big enough number, and I think we might on some of these other books. I didn't check what Bet Online has, but it's usually a lot worse than what you'll get on the domestics. But I think Jose Johnson has sneaky grappling upside here. The one knock on him is that in a lot of those grappling exchanges, he just gets super, super sloppy. I mean, you see it in all of his fights. He is not a good positional grappler, but he is a sneaky good submission grappler. And that's where I think maybe he can catch a guy like Anheliger, who I don't really think is that good. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the distance. I think it's favored to. But I'm going to be eyeing up that submission prop. I do think Jose Johnson gets his hand raised.
So I was hyped when you said sub, because that's exactly where my mind went when I saw this matchup. And it's at plus 600 on Bet Online. It actually hasn't budged an inch since they put it up yesterday. The over's at over 2.5 minus 125, which is also kind of interesting because I feel like if Johnson doesn't get a sub, we're probably going to go over.
For sure.
Minus 125 is pretty tempting. And it seems like money's still coming in on the other side. So I'll wait and see. But yeah, I like Johnson a lot here, honestly. And it feels weird saying that about Jose Johnson. I faded him completely with Blackshear. There was a clear path there for Blackshear. It was grappling, and I knew he was going to use it. I didn't think he'd get a twister, but works for me. I don't care how he wins as long as he does. Chad's not going to do that. Chad's not going to grapple this guy. And if he does, that's how we're going to get the sub. I think it's going to be something like a defensive submission. I don't really see Johnson taking him down and working from top. But if Chad tries to shoot, I can see a guillotine. I can see a triangle choke like he did to Mo Miller. It would be a mistake for Chad. But then again, like, what is he supposed to do? Stand and strike with this guy? He's going to get his ass beat on the feet too. Short reach. I don't know how the hell he's going to handle the range here. If he closes the range and backs up Johnson, sure, he can find success. But Johnson's very dangerous in the clinch too. Did you see the fight where he like just elbowed the guy when he was in on a shot and the dude just fell and his head was like wobbling?
Yep.
It was so crazy. But the dude's dangerous, powerful, good in the clinch. He's got knees and elbows, not just when they're shooting takedowns. I struggle to see how Chad wins this other than catching him. And, you know, it's MMA. Knockouts happen from any side. It can always happen. Plus 1,000 doesn't matter. But I just don't think it's going to be here. I think Johnson outworks him. I think he's a much better guy on the feet. And like I said, if Chad decides to wrestle, I think he's going to submit him. So I played him earlier when he was like almost minus 200. I parlayed him with the original Medic fight. So that's now a 1 unit bet on him. And the line's coming in on Chad. I'm seeing minus 176 now on Johnson. And if it keeps going, I'll add. I have no problem adding at a better line because I'm fairly confident in this play.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is like I honestly I think in hindsight this could look like a pretty big gift. And I know like you mentioned it is kind of sketchy to see Jose Johnson juice, but honestly in this matchup I don't really think it is. And I think the only reason why it's lined where it is because Blackshear did just steamroll him. Like if that fight played out longer and closer, more competitive, like I think maybe it could have been, then I think we probably see like minus 250, minus 275 Johnson here. So just something else I'd add.
Yeah, for sure. Which is weird because like who's expecting Chad to come in here and do something like that? Like when has he ever done anything like that? But yeah, I'll take the gift of a line. I get it. People just want to fade Johnson, but I think it's a mistake here. What's up, Victor? All right, moving on. We've got a fight that I'm very hyped for. We got Jonathan Pearce versus Joanderson Brito. Pearce is 14-4-0, 31 years old, 6 feet tall with a 71-inch reach. We got Brito. He's 15-3-1, going to be 3 years younger at 28. Going to be 4 inches shorter, but have a 1-inch reach advantage. I'll start us off here. I'm heavily on Pearce. I like him quite a bit. I got in at minus 150, and I was pretty surprised to see the line keep going down. And like I get some of it because Brito, I think Brito's very solid. I like him a lot as a fighter. I don't think I've bet against him just yet. I think he's a very good striker, big power. I don't think he's a very good striker. I think he's a decent striker. I think he wings a lot of his strikes and he gets a little sloppy. So I wouldn't call him very good, but he's solid, goes to the body, which I like. He has big power, good grappling, good offensive wrestling. We see him taking guys' backs. We see him transitioning nicely on the ground. And with Pearce, I'll talk about all the good things in a second, but in the Christian Rodriguez fight, a 135er who came in on short notice, he got put into dangerous situations more than once. He got threatened with, I think, like 3 submission attempts. One was very close. So that's a little concerning against a guy like Brito, who is good on the ground and does have a good submission game and is good at nullifying guys like Diego Lopez on the Contender Series. Once he took down Lopez, Lopez couldn't do anything at all, and that's how he beat him. I just don't think that's going to work here with Pearce. I think this is going to look more like the Algio fight, but to more of an extreme, because I have Pearce as a similar style as Algio, just to a bigger extreme. His output with both the striking and the takedowns is ridiculous. He's relentless with the takedowns, shooting at a crazy pace, always going for it. And his striking has come a long way. I think he's a much better striker than he used to be. And the output, like I mentioned, is fantastic. So mix that together. I mean, and the cardio and the fact that he's hard to finish. He's just breaking people left and right, and I kind of think he's going to do it here again. I think he breaks Brito down the stretch, maybe a tough round 1, but after that, I think he takes over. Maybe a late finish, maybe a decision. I don't really care. That's why I played the money line. If they give me some nice props on the domestics once they open up for like round 3, round 2, I'll check it out. But on Bet Online, it's not worth playing right now. How about you, John?
Yeah, this is one I kind of went back and forth on when I first dug into the matchup. I do slightly lean Joanderson Brito. I'm definitely not as convicted as you because I see the path to victory for both guys. Like you mentioned, the upside for Pearce is like the dude's pace is ridiculous and his grappling is legit good. The one thing that I never like about Pearce is he is so hittable and he just seems to get rocked in basically all of his fights. Like literally almost every single fight. I think he's been at least hurt or stumbled or wobbled. And then of course he's so good at working through it and getting in close and just sticking to his opponents like glue, using that grappling. And that's great here. And I do think he's going to have a clear cardio advantage. I just worry that a guy as explosive as Brito, instead of just hurting him, he might just like completely knock this dude out. So that's like, I know it's kind of like a cop out, but that's just the power is really the great equalizer for me. So slight dog money. I'll slightly favor Joanderson Brito, but it's certainly one where I could see either guy winning and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, definitely fair. I'm a little concerned about the chin and the power of Brito. I mean, the dude hits like a truck. So as long as Pearce can hold it together one round, the first round, then I think he's going to be okay. But definitely get it.
Yeah, could be a live spot too. You know, if Brito like hurts him a little bit and it looks sketchy, but he makes it to the bell, you know, you might get a half decent number on Pearce live.
Yeah, that one, and also the Charles Johnson fight. I was thinking to myself, I don't really live bet all too much, but that seems like a good one because I think Estevam wins round one probably 9 out of 10 times, if not more.
Yep, agreed.
But all right, moving on. We've got we got a good fight. Got Mick Parkin versus Caio Machado. I can't help but laugh every time I see Caio just because of his Lee Main fights that we'll talk about. But Mick Parkin 7-0, undefeated, 28 years old. He's 6'4" with a 79-inch reach. Machado 8-1-1, 29. He's 1 year older, same height, 1-inch reach disadvantage. Why don't you start us off, John?
Yeah, this is one of your classic low-level heavyweight spots. Whenever you have like one guy who's a big favorite in fights like these, it's almost like always tempting me to just like look harder at the underdog here. But honestly, I can't do it, man. Like, shout out to Machado because I did bet him on the Contender Series fight against Kevin Zaflarski, who literally did nothing but stare at him for 15 minutes. And the pathetic thing for Machado is that he still couldn't earn a finish when Zaflarski was literally just a punching bag. I mean, he literally didn't move the entire fight. So I don't know. It's one of those things where Machado, very low level guy, probably has like meme type of finishing upside. Like he's almost like a budget version of a guy like Jordan Wright to me. But outside of that, I mean, I don't think he's going to win. I honestly, I don't know if he'll win any fights in the UFC. And even though he does like former BFL champ, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like he fought absolutely nobody. And then the one time he fought a half decent guy, a guy who we thought was half decent in that Zaflarski fight, Zaflarski didn't test him at all. And we saw Machado really gas out basically after the first 5 minutes. I mean, he was huffing and puffing in there. So even though I don't rate Mick Parkin super highly, we at least saw some improvements from that Contender Series fight to his UFC debut, where he came through as an underdog against Jamal Pogues. I think he even outlanded him in the third round. So the cardio checked out for a guy that had never been 15 minutes previously. So I think Parkin's going to have the volume. I think he's probably a little bit more powerful, and I trust the cardio more. So even though he's a big favorite, not playing him at the money line, but I do think he probably wins here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he wins this at a pretty high clip. For me, Machado, like, I thought Zaflarski would win, but I don't think anyone predicted Zaflarski coming in and looking the way he did. That was just an unbelievable performance in a bad way. Just awful. That dude is never going to sniff the UFC again in his life. And like, I laugh because you spoke about Machado's like level of competition. BFL, I'm sorry. Like, I love Canada and all of their martial artists and all of them, but my God, the regional scene there sucks. And BFL does not have good fighters. He fought Lee Main 2 times, father of Jordan Main, who was 54 or 52 years old at the time they fought. In his 50s, not in his 40s. The dude was in his 50s when they fought. And yeah, Machado won comfortably. But honestly, like, Lee Main put more pressure on him than Zaflarski did. Hit him harder, put him up against the cage, did his best for a 50-year-old man, but he did better than Kevin. And then, like, his best win is probably Chris Larson, who's just like this Hulk of a man. But Chris Larson isn't any good either. He just has a ton of power, and he did wobble Machado a few times. Didn't get him out of there. Machado's tough. I'll give him that. He can fight through the bad cardio. Like you mentioned, he was gassed after round 1, but still throwing a ton. Decent ground game. Maybe he can get takedowns here. Maybe, because Parkin's takedown defense, at least so far, hasn't looked amazing. Neves took him down pretty easily and then just died. I don't know what that was, but just absolutely fell off a cliff. So maybe that's a path for Machado, but I haven't seen enough of his offensive wrestling to really think that's going to be a clear path. Parkin does seem to have good get-ups, and on the feet, I just think he's tremendously cleaner. He might get outpaced a little bit. That's my one concern. But if he can keep it clean at his range, I think he's going to pick Machado apart. Maybe finish him late. I feel like we're probably going to go to a decision in this one. It's just going to be another sloppy decision fight. But I will say I do think Machado can get a few wins if they give him the right guys. Like maybe Parisian. That could be a good fight. Chris Barnett maybe. Could probably beat him. Maybe.
I don't know, man. Barnett's like, I'm not gonna say he's sneaky good, but I mean, I would take if that's like a pick 'em or anywhere close, I would bet Barnett.
You would bet Barnett as a pick 'em
against Machado? Yeah, I would. Now they have to book it. Whether Machado wins or loses, that's the fight to make.
They have to book it,
and we'll bet it with each other as well.
I'm down. I'll never forget Barnett's first UFC fight, bro. I was there live, and we just walked into the stadium, and I had put money on John Vellante, which in hindsight is an insane thing to say out loud. And dude, when I saw that kick, I was like, okay, whatever. I'll take the L there.
Yeah.
But all right, we can move on. Next up, we've got Lucie Pudilova versus Ailin Perez. Pudilova, she's 14-8-0, 29 years old, 5'8" with a 67-inch reach. On the other side, Ailin Perez, 8-2-0. She's also 29, going to be 3 inches shorter though, and she's going to have a 1-inch reach disadvantage. New nickname on Tapology says Nurmagomedov. I don't know if that's real or if someone's just messing around, but it's funny and I'll take it. I'll start us off here. So I played Perez early, right after opener, plus money, and then I kind of just forgot about it. And I played her because I feel like she's going to have a better pace. I like her a lot in terms of that she fights for your money. She's one of those people that we say have the dog in them. Absolutely has that dog in her. Striking is okay. Not a huge fan of her striking. I actually think Pudilova is a better striker, but I do think she has more power, more output, and like I mentioned, the pace. And then the offensive wrestling. So this is why I don't like the line at all anymore. Like this, she's like minus 180, minus 200. I saw at this point, it's Pudilova or pass for me because Pudilova is also a good wrestler. She's a pretty solid wrestler herself, decent takedown defense, and she's going to be the bigger woman here in terms of just size. Perez will be more physical, more built, but Pudilova is going to be the bigger lady. And I just think she has her own grappling that she can hang it and use it on her own. And if she can slow down Perez, she's the better striker, in my opinion, just technique wise. If she's not getting bum rushed and getting backed up constantly, I think she's a cleaner striker and also a decent wrestler. So at this line, it's Pudilova or pass. I think Perez wins it more often than not, but I don't think she should be minus 180. She's still very green, still very sloppy, makes a lot of mistakes. She's not someone who should ever be minus 200 right now, in my opinion. Like Ashley Evans-Smith, okay, but against a decent fighter like Pudilova, I don't think it's a great line. I do still think Perez will win, though. How about you, John?
Yeah, I was going to say before you added the Ashley Evans-Smith, I was going to say Perez certainly deserved minus 200 against her because she was like minus $1 million in that fight. She was never losing that fight. I do lean Perez for sure. I had to do a double take there. You said she opened as the dog. I mean, that's one of these openers where you just literally bet the balance and just keep hitting it until they don't let you hit it anymore. Because I plus 142. I don't know if you were able to get that, but that was the open, at least according to fight odds. That's ridiculous to me. I do think the line is about where it should be now. I think Perez is, you mentioned the pace, like the pace alone, along with her grappling, which it's not like she's the world's best grappler, but those two things combined, that alone is going to take her far in this division. And Pudilova is somebody who we've seen have grappling success against people who didn't really know how to grapple. And I think that's the key difference here, because even though we've seen her offensively, land multiple takedowns, whatever, we've also seen her dating back to the first time she was in the UFC, getting badly out grappled a couple times. So it's like, I don't think that she's going to have much for Perez if Perez just goes to that same game plan like I expected her to. So in that regard, I do think Perez gets the better of the grappling exchanges, does enough, wins pretty convincingly here.
All right, good to hear. But moving on, we've got Nikolas Motta versus Trey Ogden. Motta, 13-5-0. He's 30 years old, 5'9" with a 70-inch reach. Ogden on the other side, 16-6-0, 34. He's 4 years older, 2 inches taller, and has a 2-inch reach advantage. Why don't you start us off, John?
Yeah, this is one I like the over here. I don't know if that's a hot take because we have a guy like Nikolas Motta who is so like kill or be killed. Like he's basically just a power boxer, doesn't throw a ton of volume, but when he lands, he does have power. Dude's got no chin. He's been knocked out, I think, 4 times in his career. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think all of those, or all of them but the Jim Miller fight, I think was the first round, which like if old man, shout out to A10 Miller, but if he's knocking you out and dusting you on the feet, it ain't a good look, man. And so, but the why I like the over here is because this is one where both guys, the way that they win fights doesn't really match up with the other guy's weakness. So, for example, Ogden has been submitted multiple times in his career. Almost all of his career losses, I think. Motta, basically no grappling or very little grappling. And then on the flip side, I mentioned Motta's chin. He's got serious durability concerns. Trey Ogden, 0 career wins by knockout. The dude does not seem to have a ton of power. So it's like, it's one of those things where, can it happen? Sure, it's MMA. Anything can happen. But I think both guys just don't have what they need to be able to really finish the other guy here. So that's why I think, getting plus money on the over 2.5 is a pretty decent look here. In terms of who I think is going to win, I do lean Motta just because I've never been a Trey Ogden guy. I don't really think he's all that good, basically. I don't think he's basically won most of his fights by submission, but he doesn't even really look to get the fight to the ground in some of his fights. And so if this one plays out on the feet, like Motta's just a better boxer to me. And I think in a close competitive fight where the volume's relatively even, I think the power is going to be the difference. So I lean Motta, but I really like the over here.
Yeah, the over is plus money. And that's a really good point, that like their strengths and their weaknesses just don't match up. Like he has 3 losses by sub, 3 by decision. 2 of them were just guillotines from the same exact guy in the same exact way, Thomas Gifford. And Motta has 0 submission wins. And then on the other side, Ogden never been knocked out. Motta has 9 knockout wins, been knocked out 4 times himself, and Ogden's never knocked anyone out. I went into this one and I saw the line -130, and I told myself there's no way I'm not betting Motta here, just off of memory. I also never thought highly of Ogden. I backed him against Jordan Leavitt as an underdog in a fight he really should have won. But after that left a sour taste in my mouth. I was done with him. But then I ran the tape, and honestly, like I like Ogden to win. Not enough to bet him at this line. I would need him to be a bigger dog again. But the thing for me is, like, first of all, we don't really know what what Motta's ground game is going to look like. He hasn't really been taken down just yet. He's been taken down outside of the region, outside of the UFC on the regionals, but haven't seen too much on it. Don't really know what his get-ups look like. Don't really know. Like, his takedown defense looks okay. Miller shot 1 time, and Lowry shot 1 time, and he did the right things. I like to look for like the hand control, the underhooks, what they're doing with their legs and their hips, because hips are super important. And it looked good, but I don't really know. And with Ogden, he hasn't, like you mentioned, he hasn't used it in the UFC almost at all, his grappling, which is really, really weird, because his wrestling is good. Like, his wrestling is solid. Dominated JJ Ikonovich on the ground, very strong on top, 11 submission wins. So it's actually really confusing that he hasn't gone to it, but it is there. And I do think it's something we got to think about, because he could just suddenly decide to use it. It's still there. It doesn't go away. And his striking, I was watching, and I thought he kind of looked better in the Bahamondes fight. I saw my guy hit a body shot, and I was like, yeah, Ogden, there you go. There you go. And it was a nice one too. He's good at using his range. It's just the problem is he's only got that jab and the leg kicks, and then these new occasional body shots. But other than that, that's really all he's got on the feet, which is why I do think if we're on the feet, Motta probably wins this more often than not. But because Ogden's bigger and longer, he does use his range. If he can get it going on the feet, if he can mix in that grappling, I really do think he can take over here and win this fight. So I'm going to stay away. I'm going to pick Ogden, but if he becomes a bigger dog, I'll take a shot. But we can move right along. Next up, we've got Amanda Ribas versus Luana Pinheiro. Ribas, 11-4-0, 30 years old, 5'3" with a 66-inch reach. On the other side, Pinheiro, she's 11-1-0, 5'4". She's 1 inch taller, 30 years old as well, and she's going to have a 4-inch reach disadvantage. And I'll start us off here. So I think Ribas is the rightful favorite, and I think she wins this at a pretty high clip. But the way I tackled it was I took Pinheiro, the spread, plus 3.5 at plus 125. I put a unit on it. Only need her to win 1 round and need her not to get finished. I think she wins around at a pretty decent clip. She's got good striking, good power. Ribas coming down in a weight class after the last performance against Macy Barber. Maybe she can hurt her in the first, wobble her a little bit, land the bigger shots, win the first. And after that, I think Ribas takes over at a decent clip because I think her cardio is pretty questionable for Pinheiro. I question if she can really get Ribas down herself because they both have judo backgrounds, and I don't really see that working too well on each other. But we have seen Ribas go for double legs, single legs. Pinheiro, not so much. I saw her maybe go for one single. The rest are all throws. So I think Ribas will be able to keep it on the feet, maybe get her own takedowns, and then honestly, maybe, yeah, I do think she'll take over. I was gonna say maybe like a late finish, but I really hope not because of my spread, because I need that not to happen. Yeah, I'll take Ribas to win, but I think Pinheiro wins at least one round, and I think she should survive. I just need that cardio to hold up because I have concerns about the cardio. Even against Sam Hughes, I felt like she really slowed down in the third round, so that's my main problem here. But yeah, Ribas to win, Pinheiro spread for the bet. How about you, John?
Yeah, it's tough for me as an Amanda Ribas, huge fan. It's just that chin, man. And I mentioned it with Motta. It's the same thing with Amanda Ribas. Ribas, I think it's more skilled, for sure. If Ribas had a chin, I think she's like legitimately like a contender across multiple divisions. Honestly, the thing is she just doesn't have the chin. Like, she's been knocked out 3 times. Anytime she's stuck at space, you do not feel good if you have money on her, because almost anything that lands seems to get some sort of reaction from her. Now, everything else is great. Like, she keeps a high pace. She can mix in the calf kicks, solid jab as well. Even though she likes to do that weird, like, and whenever somebody hits her, she does like that, shakes it off, like whatever the hell that is. But it's the ground game. She averages multiple takedowns per 15 minutes, black belt in jiu-jitsu. Anytime she's gone to that, we've seen the control is there. She can sometimes look for submissions as well. She hasn't been as aggressive doing it lately. She's more of just like a consolidate position type. But when you're at space, like I mentioned, and you have somebody like Pinheiro, who I don't think is very good, but is explosive. Coming into contenders a couple seasons ago, most of her wins came inside the first round, and then bam, she knocks out the girl in the first round. Impressive knockout. Now, as we saw in her debut, complete gas can. She goes around with random Marcos, and she's just looking for any quit, any way out, and she took it and got the DQ in that fight.
That performance was crazy. Like, what she was doing. I was just watching it back.
Dude, I believe I bet Marcos, and I think I was heavy on DraftKings as well. So that, I was tilting my face off with that. Like, the acting on that, I'm like, hats off to her. If it doesn't work out in the UFC, maybe there's a daytime soap opera that maybe she can get involved with. Decent looking girl, so I'm sure there'll be gigs out there for her. But in terms of the matchup, like I mentioned, she does have power, and that's the concern. That's why I'm not like backing up the Brinks truck to parlay Amanda Ribas here, because I do think Ribas is clearly the better round winner. I think she's clearly more skilled, and I think she is going to be winning this fight until she loses, if she loses. And I still don't think she will, but it's enough of a concern for me not to back her, not to parlay her, and that sort of thing. So the pick is going to be Ribas, but I just can't. I can't trust her, honestly.
Yeah, fair enough. Definitely can't trust that chin. That's why I couldn't get there with the money line even before I ended up playing the spread. But all right, we can move on. So we're going to do the 2 fights that got replaced real quick because they're not on Tapology. No idea where they're going to be on the order. So I'll just throw them in here now. I know John told me earlier he didn't fully do them because they literally came out today. I was able to do one matchup, and then one of them I'll do off memory. But just so you guys know, we haven't fully taped them, haven't fully gone through it, but we're going to just run over them because we have them now. So for the first one, we have Denis Tiuiulin coming in on short notice to fight Chris Duncan. Tiuiulin, he's 35 years old now, 6'1", don't have the reach up right now. Duncan, 28, so he's going to be 7 years younger and going to be 1 inch taller. Why don't you start us off here, John?
I'll start on the Duncan side. This is a guy that, man, I've really tried to fade him so far, and it hasn't worked out for me. I also like to look at overs in his fight, which I guess looks really bad because he just keeps knocking everybody out. But I just think these type of fighters who are very low volume, who basically have to win by knockout in a lot of their fights, I'm never going to be all that sold on them, to be honest with you. And even though he is quick, he does a lot of flashy things, and he is probably going to get quite a few knockouts. It's never like, I'm more of a, hey, who's got the better process? Who's the better round winner? It's hard for me to really quantify just how often he's finishing these people. So I guess that maybe is a leak in my game, but it hasn't worked out yet to fade him. I don't think this is the spot because against a guy like Denis Tiuiulin, who is basically just a big power puncher, has to hurt you early or he's probably getting finished. I think he probably gets finished here. So even though it'll probably be fun for as long as they stand and trade with each other, I think Duncan's clearly faster, more explosive, younger, probably more durable as well. Probably gets a knockout.
Yeah, I think Duncan wins also. So for me, I did fade him. I faded him with Petrosian successfully. That was nice.
Oh, that's right. We did get a fade on him, didn't we?
Yeah.
I was thinking of I'm burnt from the who's the ball?
Todorovic?
Yeah, Dusko Todorovic. I bet him big, and I bet the over, and he like blew out his knee in the first round, and I lost both bets. But that's right, Petrosian. So we did get a fade spot. All right.
Carry on. That fight, the Todorovic fight, I taped it for like 4 hours. It was just one of those fights where I was stuck on it, but just stubborn as hell. I didn't want to let go until I had a side, and then I ended up passing, and I was so happy I passed. It was brutal. But yeah, I faded him with Petrosian, and it was pretty much for the exact reason why Petrosian won, because I thought Petrosian could just outwork him. Duncan could be low volume, and he really just falls in love with that flashy stuff. And I'm really not a big fan of the flashy stuff. I fade that when I have the opportunity, and I did. I don't think this is the spot. I like Tiuiulin a lot. I've tried to back him successfully once. The rest have been unsuccessful. He's a good boxer. He's a very solid striker, really nice body shots. I think he's going to have more output than Duncan, but he's different from a guy like Petrosian because Petrosian has a lot of lateral movement. Tiuiulin does not. He doesn't move a ton. He's very flat-footed, and I think Duncan could probably just pick him apart. He is going to have a reach advantage, I'm pretty sure. Just don't have the number in front of me, and I just think he can pick him apart at range. Maybe some good work in the clinch. I wouldn't really clinch up with Tiuiulin, though. He's got some nice body shots, good elbows of his own. If he can grapple, that could get the job done. We know Denis is not a great grappler. His takedown defense is pretty good, 69%. And a lot of guys have shot on him. A lot of guys shoot on him, almost every opponent. But once he's on the ground, then he's kind of just stuck. Like he doesn't have great get-ups. And if Duncan can get him down, I think he could maybe get a sub. He only has one submission win, but Denis has been submitted 4 times. So definitely something that can happen. Maybe he can get a knockout late. I think Duncan wins by decision, probably. That's what I'm thinking. But we'll see what the line is. No idea right now. I imagine they're going to open Duncan like minus 185, 200 is my guesstimate.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that would be accurate, and I'd stay off. But maybe if it's closer, I'd hop on Duncan. We'll have to see. But all right, for our second fight, that's a short replacement. We got Uros Medic staying on. Johnny Parsons dropped out, I think today, literally. And coming in is Myktybek Orolbai, a guy from the LFA. John, I think you mentioned you don't really have much on this one just yet.
Yeah, I got to look into the LFA guy. I knew like a little bit about him. I haven't taped him whatsoever. So really just don't have any sort of insight here other than the fact I do think it's going to be a banger. So hopefully the unders, maybe not too juice. We can look at that. But other than that, I don't have anything yet.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if the under is playable. Medic never been to a decision. But this guy Orolbai, I honestly think he's probably going to win. I've got some questions. He did have a fight October 27th, so he's fought relatively recently. Hopefully stayed in camp, but that's a big question mark because Medic will push him. You know, Medic, we saw in the last fight, he's not just a round one or bust guy. He can go 3 rounds and even get a finish in the third. Cardio looked okay. He did look a little bit slower, threw a little bit less, but definitely not what we thought. Like the guy can hang 3 rounds. I think he can go to a decision. He'll be okay. Orolbai usually has great cardio. He can grapple for 3 rounds. Fine. He's a very, very good wrestler. Striking is pretty good. It's not enough to hang with Medic on the feet if that's all he's doing, but it's definitely enough to set up the shots, set up the takedowns. He's not one of these wrestlers who's just throwing winging shots. He'll actually throw straight. He'll actually put together combinations. Knocked out his last opponent with a really clean uppercut. Just one shot. Dude fell face planted. Yeah, I think he's going to get the takedowns, and I think that's what's going to get the job done. We've seen Medic worked on the ground a little bit. We saw Turner submit him. Semmelsberger multiple times was able to take his back. Didn't get the hooks in or anything like that, but he threatened it. And Orolbai, he'll take his back. Like he'll take him down. He'll take his back. He'll work him from there. If he can get the sub, great. If not, he'll just use ground and pound. As long as he doesn't gas, I think he wins this at a pretty high clip. I have a feeling they're going to open him as an underdog. Maybe that's wishful thinking because I want to play him as the underdog, but we'll see. If he's a favorite, I would pass just because A, he's not as good of a striker as Medic. So if he can't get those takedowns, he's going to struggle. And B, just a short notice. Like, how is that going to be on a guy like him who wrestles a lot and is short and stocky? He's 5'11", I believe, but he's young. I think the cardio will be good, but again, just a big question mark. So it'll really depend on the odds. But we can move on back to our regular schedule. We've got Payton Talbott versus Nick Aguirre. Talbott's super hyped right now. 6-0, 25 years old, 5'10" with a 70-inch reach. Aguirre 7-1-0, 27. He's 2 years older, 1 inch shorter, going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. I'll start us off here. So, I mean, I'm on Talbott like everybody else. Parlayed him when he was minus 550, like half the planet for a unit. But honestly, I'm starting to regret it and regret not just taking a little sprinkle on Aguirre. And it's only because of the grappling, because I think that Talbott, he's great and all, but there's still a big hole in the grappling. Still there. He's still getting taken down. He got taken down in the Ribas fight 7 months ago. That was pre-UFC. Was on Uriah Faber's promotion, A1. And Ribas is good, though. I'll give him credit there. And he's more physical than Aguirre, but there's a hole there for Talbott. It's clear. Definitely a hole, but his get-ups are good. And on the feet, I don't know what Aguirre has to offer for him. Aguirre's striking is kind of horrible. Striking defense is horrible. I know he fought Argueta at 145, but Argueta is also a 135er usually. I think that was just a short notice bout. They did it at 145, but it's not like he fought a guy who usually fights at a heavier weight class. And the wrestling's good, but there's not enough striking to set it up. I think that's going to be the problem here. Maybe he gets Talbott down early, but as the fight goes on, I think he's going to really struggle to find Talbott and be able to actually get him down. And Talbott, he picks it up. He's one of these guys who I wouldn't call him a slow starter, but he gets better as the fight progresses. Not like a one-hit KO guy, but he's an attritional guy. He'll knock guys out in the second or third round. That's probably what's going to happen here. I'll look for those props. I think realistically, he survives any wrestling from Aguirre in the first and then finishes him later, just beats the crap out of him. How about you, John?
Yeah, 100%. Right there with you. Talbott is just going to be a guy that it really doesn't matter on the matchup. I'm always going to look at what the odds are for round 2 and round 3 finishes, specifically KO. And I think that works here against a guy like Aguirre or Aguirre, however you say it.
I think Aguirre's right.
However you say it. But the dude seems to be more of a kill or be killed style of fighter. When he fought Dan Argueta on short notice, he made it the distance, but I think that was the first time he had ever been 15 minutes. And Argueta is not really like, he's a good grappler, but he's not like this huge finishing threat, especially on the feet. And I think that's going to be the difference here with a guy like Talbott, who you mentioned is going to start slow, get his reads. And then in rounds 2 and round 3, especially if Aguirre starts to fade at all, if Talbott wants to keep this fight on the feet, I think he's going to be able to do that. And I think he ends up melting him. All of his knockouts have come in the second round or in the third round. They've all been over the 1.5 round mark. And that Reyes fight on Contender Series, it made it the distance, but that's because Reyes is like stupid durable. Like hardly anybody in this division is eating those shots at that pace that Talbott put on him. I think if he does that here against a guy like Aguirre, he breaks him, he knocks him out, he gets the win.
Yeah, I'm with you. He like set a record, right, on the Contender Series?
Yeah, for like most significant strikes landed in bantamweight history or something on Contender Series.
I tried to fade him there. I played Cortez there.
So did I.
I felt decent in the first round. I'm pretty sure we won that one, but then it was all Talbott after that.
Yeah, we won the first round, but honestly, I didn't feel decent. Like I could see like the tides were like we had like basically Cortez's best round, and it was still like competitive. And then you can see Cortez kind of starting to fade. And then once Talbott, started getting his hands going and getting in a groove, it was like, yeah, this isn't even really all that close.
Yeah, he ran away with it after that. But all right, we can move on. Next up, this is probably the funnest matchup we have on the card. Not because it's violent or anything. It's just hilarious. We got Jordan Leavitt, the Monkey King, versus Chase Hooper, the Dream. Leavitt, 11-2-0, 28 years old, 5'9" with a 71-inch reach. Hooper, 12-3-1. He's 24, 4 years younger, 6'1", 3 inches taller, and going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. Why don't you start us off, John?
Yeah, this is one where I think I'll preface it by saying the early lines on Chase Hooper, I think were great. I think where it's at now, I'm pretty tempted on the Monkey King because, I mean, yes, I do favor Chase Hooper to win, like if this is a pick'em, whatever, but it's not. And so for that reason, I think this is going to be pretty competitive. So now Hooper's up to like minus 200 or whatever it is. Like, I think we're getting a little carried away here because I do think his pace is very difficult to deal with. He's obviously a very slick submission grappler, and that pace is just brutal. I mean, for anybody, like it doesn't matter how much you hit him. He's just right on you and he doesn't stop. And even though the striking isn't pretty, it is coming along. So there's a lot of things I like about a guy like Chase Hooper. But on the flip side, Jordan Leavitt is still a pretty solid grappler in his own right. And I wouldn't be shocked to see Leavitt be able to land multiple takedowns here because Hooper is a guy that gives up the takedowns because he's more than willing to dance on the mat. And if you do that against a guy like Leavitt, who's arguably just as slick on the mat in some of those exchanges, like it's just a lot more variance than I'd like at minus 200. And I don't know, man, I'm kind of tempted to take the dog shot here on the Monkey King because I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of shocks some people here.
Yeah, same exact side for me, same thought process. Like when I saw the line, I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw it at one point because it opened at minus 200 where it's at now, and then it went all the way up to minus 139. So money came in on Leavitt, and I saw that line. I was like, okay, seems about right. And I stayed off of it because I'm just not in the business of backing Hooper. Well, depending on the fight. I did back him last time out, but generally not in the business of backing Hooper. Usually look for ways to go against him. And then when I saw I got plus 220 on Leavitt because when I saw that price, I was like, if this goes any higher than this, that's just absurd. So I'm going to buy in now. And like for me, it's like 55-45 at worst here. Like at worst, I don't think it should be this wide because what does Hooper really do better other than the pace? The pace for sure. And Leavitt, I get it. He can slow down a little bit for sure. So I'll give that to Hooper. But offensive wrestling, you mentioned it. I think Leavitt's a better wrestler. I definitely think he's a better offensive wrestler. He's the one who had success against Patty in the first round. He was able to take him down, take his back, control him. And Patty's a much more physical guy than Chase Hooper. So I do think he's going to have success there. And we don't see people shoot on Hooper too much because of the jiu-jitsu, and they know that's exactly where he wants to go because he'll literally drop to his back or roll for ankles when he can't get anything else. But a guy like Leavitt, like you mentioned, also good jiu-jitsu, I don't think he's going to worry about that. I think he'll happily take down Hooper and survive and be able to get top control, ground and pound. I don't think he subs Hooper. I think we probably go to a decision. So the odds are kind of tempting also on the over because it's minus 150, which I think is still pretty good, but I don't know if I'm going to play it. But yeah, I think Leavitt's live. In the striking, like who's really the better striker? I guess I'll give it to Hooper by a little bit just because he throws more with the hands. Leavitt doesn't throw his hands so much. Like in the Ogden fight, I think he landed like 70 significant strikes and 60 something of those were leg kicks. So I'll give the hands to Hooper, but I just don't think it's wide enough for it to be this price. Like I think on the feet, it's going to be relatively close. Hooper just throwing more. I think Ogden's the one with the offensive wrestling edge here. So he's the one who's going to be winning minutes on the ground, in my opinion. So I think he wins a decision here. I think he's a great underdog play, and I was more than happy to play it at plus 220. But we can move right along. Next up, we've got our co-main event of the evening. We've got Jake Matthews versus Michael Morales. Matthews, 19-6-0, 29 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. Morales, 15-0, undefeated. 5 years younger at 24. He's going to be 1 inch taller and have a 7-inch reach advantage. I'll start us off here. So I like Matthews in terms of making money because had a decent read on him. Bet him against Flowers, round 2 in particular. That was a sweet cash. Bet against him with Matthew Semmelsberger as the underdog. That was a beautiful cash. Bet him against Fiallo. That felt great. And yeah, I don't think I bet him before that, but I've had a decent run with him so far. Don't think he's going to win this fight, honestly. I think Morales wins this at a pretty high clip. I think Morales has come a long way. And I've seen people giving him shit for the Max Griffin fight, which really confuses me because Max Griffin, in my mind, is a very, very solid fighter, very good striker, very good wrestler. I know he's 38 years old at this point, but he's still hanging with the best of them. Don't think that's a bad win at all. I think it's a very good win, and I think the way he did it was very impressive. So I think he's the better striker. Matthews has some decent hands, good combinations, but he can be low output on the feet a little bit. He can be hittable, and he's got good wrestling of his own, but we saw him get taken down before. We've seen him taken down by Darius Flowers, of all people. I love Darius, great fighter. Hyped to see him back at 155, but I never thought he should have been a welterweight, so I wasn't shocked by that outcome. Morales is a much better wrestler than Darius Flowers. He's a real welterweight, very strong, Brazilian national champion, something along those lines. You hear that a ton. I think he can get the takedowns. I think he has the better power. I think he's a better technical striker. For me, for Matthews to win here, either Morales has to choke or Matthews has to knock him out. And I don't think either is that likely. So I like Morales. Not enough to go around hammering him. I have him, I think, in one parlay. Do I have anything on him? Hold on. I actually have nothing on Morales. No, I do. I knew I did. I got him at minus 245. I played his money line straight. That's what I ended up doing. Now he's minus 325. I don't know about all that. I would probably just stay off at that number, but I think he's a pretty safe play. Probably one of my more confident spots on the card. I just think he's the better guy. How about you, John?
Yeah, on coming into this week, I was like, man, Matthews probably going to be a big number. Morales is a guy who is a good prospect, but he's basically, since he come into the UFC, he's billed as this huge contender. Basically, he's been a huge favorite in all of his fights, and I've tried to fade him because of that. I'm always going to play the number if I think the number's good, and we just naturally are going to get good numbers against him because he has looked the part. You mentioned the Ecuadorian wrestling background, so he's not just a striker. He's got the knockout power as well. We've seen that power even when he doesn't get the knockout. He's dropping guys. That's the concern here because I think Matthews has a skill set to give Morales some fits here. He's a pretty good striker, as we've seen, especially lately. His striking has looked pretty clean. Obviously, as the black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, can land multiple takedowns potentially here. But Morales is a guy who kind of fights with his hands low and defends those takedowns pretty well, even though we have seen him get taken down. And when you take him down, you can control him for a little bit. So I think he still does have those holes. But the one thing giving me pause here is he does have the clear power. And Matthews, I think he's got like a sneaky bad chin. I don't even know if it's sneaky anymore because that Semmelsberger fight comes to mind where everything that Semmelsberger landed was stunning Matthews. I think he got dropped 3 times in that fight, but everything that he landed from the opening bell was hurting Jake Matthews in that fight. And that gives me some serious pause against Michael Morales, who is very powerful. And when he lands, it's probably going to hurt Matthews. So as much as I want to take the dog shot here, I don't think I'm going to end up getting to it. Going to dig into it a little bit more, but yeah, I think Morales probably gets it done for you.
Yeah, for me, this feels like a fight where, like, just looking at it, it feels like there's value on Matthews, but then, like, the more I think about it, the more I look at it, it's just like, I think Morales takes this one. But I just checked. It was 3 times Semmelsberger knocked him down. To give him credit, Semmelsberger does that to everybody. I think he's got a knockdown in all of his fights, but like you mentioned, Morales also has a lot of power.
Yep.
All right, moving on to our main event of the evening. We've got Brendan Allen versus Paul Craig. Allen, 22-5-0, 27 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. Craig on the other side, 17-6-1. He's 35 now, so he's going to be 8 years older. 1 inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage. Why don't you start us off, John?
Yeah, I was just looking quick because I didn't look yet on what the oh, it's no good. at least on Bet Online, what the KO prop is for Brendan Allen, because I thought it could be a spot where maybe they overvalue the sub relative to his KO, but it looks like they're actually overvaluing the KO, which is interesting. I do like Brendan Allen. Historically, I'm a Brendan Allen guy, even though it seems like he gets a lot of hate kind of from our MMA bubble, which I've never understood that. I think Allen is an exciting fighter. I like his style. Even though he doesn't always fight to the best of his skill set, he makes it sometimes harder on himself. I do think he's a pretty damn good fighter. He's got better hands than you would expect. Coming into the UFC, it was like his striking's no good at all. We've seen the revolution in his striking, training with guys like Henry Hooft and some of these other guys that he's been in the gym with, and obviously the ground game is still very good. So a guy like Paul Craig, I think Brendan Allen's clearly going to be the better striker, has more finishing potential on the feet. And then when it comes to the ground game, I think it's possible that Craig might be able to catch him. But I'm just going to favor the guy who I think is going to be spending time in top position. I trust him enough to stay safe in those spots. So Brendan Allen's a big favorite. I think he gets it done. I think it comes inside the distance. I don't think this one's going even 3 rounds, let alone 5.
What do you think about the over 1.5 at -115?
Yeah, I saw that. It's one of those things where I wouldn't be shocked if it went under, but I kind of think it does end like maybe later in the 2nd round, early 3rd round. So maybe there is a little bit of value there.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it too. I share a lot of your thoughts. I think Brendan Allen should win this. I've always been high on Brendan Allen. Like you, I don't really understand the hate. I get it. He lost to Strickland, got knocked out by Curtis, but he fought like an idiot in both of those fights. He just didn't play to his strength. And I guess that's the one criticism with him is his fight IQ could be questionable at best sometimes. And that's why I can't get here. I can't parlay it. I can't really do anything with this number just because he does have these blanks in it sometimes in his game just without IQ. And Paul Craig, like he'll take advantage of that. You slip for 1 second, he'll have you in a triangle or in an armbar or something. And he's looked pretty good recently. Got my guy Muniz. I really thought Muniz was going to win that one. Just kind of broke him down the stretch. Was able to finish him with TKO. I have a hard time seeing him do that to Allen. I think Allen's a better striker on the feet, whether it's at range or up close. I just think he's a much better striker. Paul Craig, extremely hittable. And I think that offensive wrestling goes to Allen. I think that he can win a lot of minutes in the grappling because Paul Craig will be happy to just lay there and hunt for his submissions. And if Allen can stay safe, which he probably can, he'll just win minutes that way. So I do think Allen wins. ITD makes sense, but his inside the distance prop is -300, which is useless. Can't do anything with that. And then with like the sub and the KO props, like you mentioned, it feels like it should be a KO just because Paul Craig also has really good jiu-jitsu. But at the same time, +125, like I'm not going to play that on a guy whose strength is the ground game. So I think Brendan Allen should win. But honestly, if the number gets crazy, I might have to take a sprinkle on Craig because he's an opportunistic finisher and he's not bad either. And he's looked good so far in his one middleweight fight. Maybe he'll look even better in this one. I doubt it. Think Brendan Allen should win, but yeah, can't with this number. But all right, guys, that's 14 fights. Thank you all for tuning in and hanging with us for just over an hour. Appreciate every one of you. Appreciate you even more, Jon. Thanks for coming on as always. Always a great time breaking down the fights with you. Why don't you tell the people where to find you, and then we'll head on out.
Yeah, as always, man, appreciate you having me on. Always enjoy chopping it up with you. You guys can follow me at Jon Kelly DFS on Twitter or on YouTube. I do weekly UFC videos that come out Wednesday, so that'll be dropping tomorrow. And on Twitter is where I'll post the links to all of my content. But thanks again, Mike. And as always, best of luck on the card, bro.
Thank you, brother. And all right, guys. Yeah. So for me, real quick, in terms of what's happening this week, tomorrow, nothing, I don't think. And then Thursday, we're probably bringing back Prop Talk again. Me and Propaholic, as usual, on Twitter Spaces. It'll probably be around 8:30, but I'll let you guys know on Twitter. And then we have a ton of regionals this week. I'm on them. I'm playing them. I'm taping them, but I don't think I'm going to have the time to do any videos. Bellator gave us 16 fights. Don't have the time with work. So I'll put up bets at Couch Warrior Pod on Twitter. That's where you'll get them. I bet them as soon as I post them as soon as I bet them. I have a Discord that's completely free. The link's in the description of this video. I post my bets there even before Twitter. So that's the first place. And then we talk fights there too. So if you're into that kind of thing, check that out. Absolutely free. And then I'll do my YouTube shorts probably tomorrow. That's what I'll do tomorrow. And I'll drop those. So if you're into quick breakdowns, you don't want to sit here, listen to us talk for a while. I do each fight 1 minute real quick. It's hard sometimes, but I talk fast so it works. And all right, guys, that's it. Thank you all for tuning in. Good luck this weekend and peace out.